All of a sudden, out of nowhere, West says the mob can't, quote, make him not love Donald Trump. And so the internet is melting down. What is going on in this country? Is it a realignment or something weirder? We'll get to it in just a minute. But first, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We want to start with Joy Reid. If you've got a TV, you may know who she is. She's the host of a weekly show on MSNBC. She's an icon on the progressive left. There is not a single fashionable opinion that Joy Reid doesn't have or isn't happy to denounce you for not having. She's a total star in Brooklyn, of course, but she wasn't always this way and didn't always have these beliefs. Back in 2006, Joy Reid sounded like a very different person. On her blog at the time, she opposed gay marriage, mocked gay people, and people she thought were gay. Now, given where she is now, these are obviously highly embarrassing opinions to have had. When the posts were discovered, she had a couple of options. She could have just apologized. People change their opinions all the time, and good for them. Why wouldn't they change their opinions? America has changed, is changing. So an honest explanation would have been just fine, and we would have defended her in that, of course. But that's not what Joy Reid did. Instead, she lied about it. She claims she never wrote those blog posts in the first place. Someone else did. She said she'd been hacked. Sinister agents, perhaps employed by Vladimir Putin, somehow broke into her blog retroactively to add the remarks. It really sounds like an MSNBC segment, part of what they run every night. She said it was a disinformation campaign waged by whom? We don't know. Shadowy forces. That was her explanation. It was a crock, a total crock. And we know it was a crock because Reid's blog posts were archived by other websites, including the Library of Congress here in Washington, all the way back to 2006. That means in order for her claims to be true, which they're not, the secret hacking plot must have begun at least 12 years ago before anyone knew or cared who Joy Reid was. That's a lie. It's a childish lie. You'd have to be a moron to believe it. Yet she's telling it. Here's the interesting part, though. NBC News is endorsing all of this as true and trying to convince other people it's true. Yesterday, the network circulated a vague report by an extremely odd person called Jonathan Nichols, who says he's an independent security consultant, whatever that is, in which he affirms Joy Reid's ludicrous fantasy. Obviously, he offers no evidence. Keep in mind that NBC, which is passing this out to other news organizations, claims itself to be a news organization. And news organizations are not supposed to lie. That's rule one. And yet NBC executives make a habit of lying. They lied about the Access Hollywood tape a couple of years ago. You'll remember that tape was leaked by NBC to David Fahrenthold at the Washington Post, who was a college friend of NBC News chief Noah Oppenheim. The goal in that leak was to help Hillary Clinton just 2 days before a presidential debate, and it helped. NBC later promised to reveal how that tape was leaked, but of course we haven't heard because they never told us. They lied instead, and they're still lying about that. NBC also lied when it ran interference for sex attacker Harvey Weinstein, which it did repeatedly over a long period. You'll remember that network killed Ronan Farrow's investigation into Harvey Weinstein. He had the goods, and yet NBC claimed that Farrow hadn't nailed down the story. By the way, he went and sold the story the next day to The New Yorker, but NBC said it just wasn't ready yet. Another lie. Now NBC is helping Joy Reid lie once again, and almost nobody else in the media is saying anything about it, except Michael Graham. He's a columnist for the Boston Globe, and he joins us now to tell us what exactly is going on. So, look, I just want to be completely clear. I am okay with people changing their views. My views on almost everything have changed. So I don't think there's a sin in that. And to come out and say, yeah, I thought that, I don't think that anymore, is totally fine. Why would NBC endorse and ratify and disseminate what is so clearly a false explanation from Joy Reid?
Look, maybe they're just suckers. I mean, look how they've fallen for the Russiagate story where every single leak they go, this is how, we got him now, we got him. I mean, there's apparently nothing, they know nothing about how the internet works, apparently. I think when Hillary Clinton said that she cleaned her server with a cloth, I think they went, oh, okay, with a cloth. That's how she did it. So maybe that's it. But there is something, you make a very good point, Tucker, that there's something odd about the willingness of NBC to stand by a story that is so ludicrous. It reminds me of a time in the past when another network stood behind by Dan Rather, and when the New York Times said that bogus story was fake but accurate. And so what's happened, I think, is that there are people who are in the, quote, news business who just realize they're not really in the news business. They're in the political advocacy business. And Joy Reid is an amazing political advocate. She has a lot of fans. She's very powerful. And I want to read a tweet. I don't want to get the words wrong. I apologize for my phone. But this is from a Clinton staffer who tweeted out today and then blocked me, so I had to look it back up. Make sure you're evaluating this Joy Ann Reid situation through an intersectional lens. She is one of the most important black female voices on TV.
Go
Thanks. Well, wait. That's intersectional lens. How about the fact lens? She's just lying. She's lying. Obviously, nobody went in the Wayback Machine to 2006 because, one day I know this person will be on cable TV. I'll get them now. It's nonsense. But intersectionality, really? Is it so bad?
But why? I wonder why. I mean, most people, if they work for a news organization and got caught doing something, and they went to the boss and they said, I have an idea. Let's make up a patently ludicrous lie that is provably untrue. The boss would say, how about not? Why don't you just say you did it, concede you did it, admit it, and most people, fair-minded people, will kind of forgive you and move on. Why would NBC further besmirch itself by tying itself to something so obviously false and stupid and insulting to the rest of us?
Because there's a hardcore group of people who tune in. She's on the weekends, so it's kind of like bonus revenue, and they are there once again not for news. They are there to have their biases affirmed. And let's face it, Tucker, that's a problem across the left and right media. It happens a lot, and so that's why they're there. And so my Twitter feed today was full of people who said, "I'm gay, I'm liberal, I don't care what she said. She hates Trump." She's really good at hating Trump, and if you hate Trump enough, you can do whatever you want, and all sins will be forgiven.
Man, I'm not a Joy Reid fan. I mean, to put it mildly, she's attacked me. I think she's a race baiter. But I would have given her, and any honest person, a pass if she'd been honest, which she's not. By the way, I should tell our viewers that just a minute ago, the Daily Beast, which is an online blog, kind of a mediocre one, has announced it's putting a pause on Joy Reid's columns. Apparently she writes for them, not surprisingly. Anyway, Michael Graham, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Well, according to a new report, one of the country's top left-wing organizations, a think tank called the Center for American Progress, spent years protecting sexual harassers while retaliating against their victims. Amazing. According to documents obtained by BuzzFeed, 19 current and former staffers at CAP claim they were victims of sexual harassment. Tammy Bruce is a radio host, and she's been following this story from the beginning. She joins us tonight.
Hey, Tucker.
Great to see you, Tammy. So what I found so striking about this was that Neera Tanden, who runs the Center for American Progress and who's a very outspoken feminist and quite a partisan, quite a hard partisan, kind of ignored, at least from this account, these claims of sexual harassment. I was really surprised by that. I thought that she would be exquisitely sensitive to sexual harassment claims, but no.
Yeah, look, this really started to bubble over in 2016, and of course that was an election year. And I enjoyed your segment that previously that just came up here in the sense of this intersectionality. And when I was on the left, of course, and my first book actually, The New Thought Police, which came out all the way back in 2001, was about how racism, sexism, and homophobia live on the left. That they're swathed in this sauce, and their argument always is that if we face this, or if it becomes public, or if we act on it, it'll harm the larger picture. It'll harm our goals, our narrative, our all the good work that we do in the world. And so and we saw this in Hollywood, right, with Weinstein, that if you say no or if you push back, you will do damage to too many people. Most liberals are brought up with this kind of mentality, and so they're silenced. And I think it becomes a habit after a period of time. And of course, it was the election year. They were accusing President Trump of all kinds of things. And wouldn't it be embarrassing if it came out that, in fact, they had years and currently were dealing with sexual harassment and as, of course, we learned with the Hillary Clinton campaign, a sexual harasser there that she had effectively protected and then moved the victim into a different job. This is up to this moment right now. And interestingly enough, they still point a finger at Donald Trump when it's becoming apparent that it's their issue exclusively.
That's so interesting. Wise people know how flawed they are, and they proceed with that knowledge always foremost in mind. I'm screwed up. Before I judge, keep that in mind. I feel like a lot of people, the activists on the left, not all lefties, but the activists, kind of proceed in the certainty that they're morally superior, and that no evidence changes their mind about that.
Correct. I mean, but this is the problem. It's the problem of malignant narcissism, that you're projecting all of your issues onto someone else,
Yes.
and it becomes an existential issue. You know, they can't admit it because their identity is based in being superior.
Yes.
And when that is threatened, then it ruins their entire foundation. And for the left, of course, they also use it to manipulate people. That if you're a woman or if you're a gay man, you know, they're your champions. The others, those other people, they want to get rid of you. They're building a camp for you. When, again, the heartbreaking reality is, for me as a feminist and as a gay woman, is that the damage is being done by those people who say they are our champions, while they continue to try to malign and besmirch the people whose policies, in particular, of course, President Trump's policies, the conservative policies that allow individuals to be personally empowered and individually free and financially independent, those are the people that get besmirched, when those
Yes.
are the policies that improve people's lives.
You're a very deep person. You're not your average TV person, Tammy, and I appreciate that. It's great to see you.
Thank you. I
Really
appreciate
smart.
it. Thanks, Tucker.
Rapper Kanye West did something kind of amazing on Twitter today and articulated, or appeared to articulate, his support for President Trump. One of his tweets read, and he's still tweeting right now, but one read this way: "You don't have to agree with Trump, but the mob cannot make me not love him. We are both dragon energy. He is my brother. I love everyone. I don't agree with everything anyone does. That's what makes us individuals, and we have a right to independent thought." Well, the president responded to this by tweeting, "Thank you, Kanye, very cool." After the tweets, West's Twitter following, which was enormous, plunged, I think this is right, by more than 9 million followers. What do we make of all of this? Jason Whitlock is an anchor with Fox Sports 1, and he joins us tonight. So, Jason, I'm not sure I understand exactly what's going on here. It seems maybe Kanye West decided that he's allowed, as a citizen of a free country, to say exactly what he wants to say. What's your read on this? What does this mean? Why did he write this?
Well, I think he wrote it because it's what he authentically believes, and I think he's probably trying to inspire African Americans to have a more open mind about politics and to be less demonizing of people we disagree with, and understand that we're all flawed. Our president is flawed, but that doesn't mean it's an effective strategy to write that person off or to write that side of politics off. And so I just think Kanye's being true to himself and trying to open African Americans' mind that in all things, competition is good. My background is sports, and competition is what takes you to a higher level. There's no competition for the black vote right now.
Right.
And there has been none for 50 or 60 years. I think we should look around at other ethnic groups and other groups of people. They make people compete for their votes, and politics tend to help them and move them forward while we're not experiencing the same thing.
Right. Well, any group that feels under attack tends to kind of retreat into a defensive posture, and you see this in not just African American voters, but other groups too, this exact same phenomenon. But I totally agree it's not helpful. What's the risk that he runs in saying this? It seems like kind of, even for a famous guy like Kanye West, it seems like kind of a fraught position to take. I mean, is he not going to be punished for this? Can you say this?
He's certainly going to be punished over social media, and it does not surprise me that he's lost a bunch of Twitter followers or IG followers or social media followers, because much of social media is rigged to support far left-wing thought. And if you stray, particularly as an African American, from the talking points that the left-wing, far left-wing side wants you to, they're going to extract a penalty for you having thoughts that they haven't approved. Again, Kanye's a free thinker. He always has been. His music has always been open to a lot of different interpretation and just ideas. I think he's just being consistent and true to himself, and again, trying to inspire people.
So really quickly, we're hearing from Twitter that he actually didn't lose 9 million followers, with some glitch, apparently. I don't understand it. But quickly, you're hearing people say, well, he must have a mental illness. What do you think of that explanation?
I think it's ridiculous, and I think it again goes to us as African Americans, and social media has so convinced us that liberal means pro-black and conservative means anti-black, that's how we interpret things. Oh my God, Kanye has said things that are conservative, or any conservative values. He expressed support for Candace Owens over social media, and we've been trained to anything conservative, that means anti-black. And again, if we just looked critically and really understood our history, that's just not the case. A lot of our values are conservative. A lot of the people in our community that have made great strides and had Martin Luther King, very conservative values. The entire movement was very conservative, but somehow we've changed that, and you would think it was the most far left-wing movement in the world, and that's how we got here through liberalism. And again, I'm not a political partisan. I don't participate in politics. I'm a journalist and I'm an observer. Observing us, speaking as a journalist, not as an African American, our strategy is flawed by just giving away our allegiance to one side. And I think Kanye, out of concern for African Americans, is trying to say this is a flawed strategy that is actually making us go backwards rather than forward.
Pretty bold move, I would say. Jason, thank you. We're going to talk to Jason later in the show about new evidence about how the NFL tried to avoid taking a stand during the national anthem protests. Interesting story. Plus, campaign records suggest Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign may have illegally laundered more than $80 million. For real. Details ahead.
You need this bed.
Well, little noticed filing in D.C. District Court. Well, we noticed it, but it may have exposed a massive money laundering operation by the 2016 Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic Party. Federal law, as you know, restricts how much individuals can give to a presidential campaign, but filings with the FEC suggest that Democrats may have evaded the limits, gone around them, by directing donors to state-level Democratic parties that then directly funneled the cash to the Clinton campaign. If that's true, it's a problem. Cleta Mitchell is an attorney. She's an expert on campaign finance law, and she joins us tonight. So, Cleta, tell us, if this is true, is it a crime?
Yes, it's true, and yes, it is a crime. I mean, essentially what they did was they took a perfectly legal apparatus, which is a joint fundraising committee, in this case called the Hillary Victory Committee, and participating in that were the DNC, the Hillary Clinton campaign, and 38 state parties. But what they did that was wrong is that they used the higher limits of the DNC and all these state party committees to be able to funnel money back through the DNC, which was controlled by the Hillary Clinton campaign. You know, you and I talked about this last fall, November, December, something like that. And what has happened since then is that the Committee to Defend the President, which is a hybrid PAC, their lawyer, Dan Backer, went to the records of the FEC and looked at all the reports the DNC had filed, looked at all the reports that the Hillary Clinton campaign had filed and this Hillary Victory Committee had filed, and all of these state parties. And what they have discovered by going through all these documents that are all public records, mind you, nothing that the New York Times or the Washington Post couldn't get. And they have documented in a complaint to the FEC with pages and pages of spreadsheets showing the transactions. And let me just give you a couple of examples. What they would do was they would get, say a donor would write a check for $400,000, which was to be split and allocated among the state parties, the Clinton campaign at $5,400, that was the max that she could get, and the money to the DNC. But what would happen, the donation may have been legal, but what they did with the money is what was illegal, which is that they pretended to send it to the state Democratic parties, and they didn't. In some cases, there were never any transfers made to the state parties, and the state party reports show that they never got the money. Instead, that money all went to Brooklyn. Remember, we talked about this earlier. The DNC bank account was moved from Washington, where it had been for decades, and moved to the same bank in New York that the Hillary Clinton campaign where it had its bank accounts. And remember also, so all this money that's supposed to go out to the state parties never went to the state parties. It went to the DNC account in New York, which Hillary Clinton's campaign controlled. That is the part that gets to be illegal. And remember this is a wrinkle I don't know that we would have paid that much attention to last fall, but the person who negotiated this agreement between the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign was Mark Elias, the lawyer for the Hillary Clinton campaign, who negotiated with Mark Elias, who is the lawyer for the Democratic National Committee. I mean, this is
pretty brazen.
It's a really brazen scheme, and it's all in the public record.
And
what
the
has
irony,
happened
of course, is they lost anyway. They spent twice as much as the Trump campaign.
Oh, but of course they've sued Russia. The DNC has sued Russia because it was their fault.
It's irony that makes life bearable. Thank you, Cleta Mitchell. Thank you for that explanation. Really interesting and kind of appalling.
Thank you,
really.
Tucker.
The left is using violent, let's just call it what it is, violent tactics to target supporters of gun rights. A congressman who had his home vandalized joins us next to explain what happened to him and his family. Stay tuned. Turns out it's been pretty hard for gun control advocates to change the public's mind on their issue. Gun control doesn't work, and most people know that. So activists have turned increasingly to personally targeting and harassing supporters of gun rights and their families at home. 2 weeks ago, NRA lobbyist Chris Cox had his house where he lives vandalized by anti-gun demonstrators. His wife's business was targeted as well. They scared his children. Congressman Jeff Fortenberry is a Republican who represents Lincoln, Nebraska. He says his home was targeted as well by anti-gun campaigners with the protest group Betsy Riot. Congressman Fortenberry joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Pleasure to see you. Thanks for having me.
So tell us what happened.
Well, this has actually happened to me twice. About a year ago, I happened to not be home. It was one of those unusual evenings as well where my wife was away, so one of my older daughters was taking care of the young children. My child comes out to go to school.
How many children do you have?
I have 5 children, 5 daughters.
Wow.
And my youngest child comes out, and there's a vulgar sign in my yard. Now, we live in Nebraska. Nebraska's a wonderful place to live, work, and raise a family. That's the heart of our values there. So it's not only shocking to me, but it violates a fundamental principle of civility that we have, and it scared my child. I mean, protest me, be angry at me, but don't scare my children in their home. Christmas morning, I pull the curtains open, snow is all over the yard. I thought I saw something unusual by my mailbox. Again, 2 more vulgar signs in the yard. So call the police and all that. That's just what we do. There's a basic violation of a standard here. You got differences. People, again, have the right to write me, protest me if they like. But when you attack or vandalize somebody's home, it really violates a sacred space.
Well, it's unbelievable.
Especially scaring
you've got
children.
a wife and 5 daughters at home, and you're a public figure, and you've got an office in Washington, a district office, you're on the road all the time. People can confront you with their differences whenever they want. Who did this?
On the sign, I don't know if that one has it. It probably says Betsy Riot, some kind of cult group that's in Nebraska. I don't know if they're nationwide. It seems to be related to this incident that happened up here in Washington, D.C. as well. And one of the 2 of the people identified are University of Nebraska faculty members, which is even more bizarre because they are guardians of a trust to create a university environment which is liberating in the real sense of the word in the pursuit of intellectual truth. That's inviting, that is creative and imaginative. Imagine a young person coming off a farm out of Scribner, Nebraska who wants to study ag economics and go back to the farm and help her mother and father expand that operation and is very proudly coming to the University of Nebraska and gets faced with this kind of hostility and hate because in the university setting they are insulated and they're able to propose or impose their ideology upon students. It's very jarring to our set of values. Again, Nebraska is a great place and the university is generally reflective of that, but there is a group of people there who are violating this most basic human standard.
Why should taxpayers subsidize harassment?
Well, I don't think they should. Obviously,
it's a public university sustained with state and federal dollars.
The university's in a difficult position, and obviously I think that they should do what they can within the limits of the law to try to stop this vandalism. But there's something that's deeper here. It's an intellectual vandalism, if you will. It's robbing the university student experience of the joy of creative imagination in an intellectual environment in which you debate your way through a diversity of ideas and try to come to some conclusion for good. And when you have a threatening, harassing environment, it's just inconsistent with the great trust that a university should have.
That's so nicely put, because you're not trying to win someone over to your side. You're trying to bully and intimidate someone. You're trying to force someone to agree with you, which is obviously fascist. Congressman, thank you for coming on.
Pleasure visiting with you. Thank you.
Speaking of college, university education costs more and more and more. What are you getting in return for that? We have the numbers in part 3 of our series, Is College Worth It? That's next. Higher education in America is crushingly expensive. College tuition rates are rising far faster than family income is. Colleges are also politically monochromatic. Once in school, your kids will submit to brainwashing or they will suffer. When they come home, they may have learned to hate the values you raised them with, the ones you believe in. They may also be addicted to drugs and alcohol. So obviously the costs of college are extraordinarily high, but it's worth it, we tell ourselves, for the education. Education is key. Our kids need to learn. So the question is, are they learning? Well, several years ago, a pair of academic researchers decided to find out. They studied data from a group of more than 2,000 students enrolled in four-year colleges who've been tracked over a period of years. The book that resulted from all this research was called Academically Adrift: Limited Learning on College Campuses. Among its many findings, 45% of students, quote, did not demonstrate any significant improvement in learning over the first 2 years of college. Close to 40% didn't learn anything at all over 4 years. How did students learn so little? Well, many of them never really studied. 35% of students reported spending no more than 5 hours a week in academic preparation. Overall, the study found a 50% decline in the number of hours students spent studying compared to several decades ago. The average full-time college student now spends only 2.76 hours a day on all education-related activities, going to class, studying, all of it, and more than twice as much time shopping, eating, and partying. Multiply this by an entire country, and you wind up with a deeply ignorant population. There has been a consistent decline in adult literacy in America over the past 25 years, despite the fact that more kids than ever are going to college. Two separate studies by the National Assessment of Adult Literacy found that most college graduates fall below proficiency in verbal and quantitative literacy. The majority could not compete simple cognitive tasks like comparing the viewpoints in newspaper editorials or calculating the cost of food items in the grocery store. A 2005 study found that only 31% of college graduates could read and understand a complex book. 31%. Surveys of American college graduates show that they are far more ignorant than their counterparts in virtually every other developed nation. In some cases, college graduates in this country got the same test scores as high school graduates in other countries. As the Educational Testing Service put it, quote, a decade ago, the skill level of American adults was judged to be mediocre. Now it is below even that. This is a crisis. So you would think that colleges would respond by increasing academic rigor. But the opposite has happened. A survey of the top public universities in America found that only 9 schools required an economics course for graduation, for example. Only 5 required a survey course in American history. And as one researcher noted, despite lip service given to multiculturalism, fewer than half required even intermediate study of a foreign language. Meanwhile, the number of degrees awarded in women's and gender studies increased by more than 300% since 1990. College classes are getting flimsier. College graduates are getting dumber. But you would never know it from their grades, which are getting higher. In 1983, the average college GPA in this country was 2.8. It's now over 3.1. Grade inflation is everywhere, but it's most profound at private schools. At Wake Forest, for example, in North Carolina, the cumulative GPA for graduating seniors in 1988 was 2.84. In 2014, it was 3.4. Nationally, the most common grade given in college courses right now is an A. According to the New York Times, about 43% of all letter grades given are A's. Only about 10% are D's and F's. In other words, more students are failing, yet almost nobody fails. Kids know less, but their teachers assure them they know more. Colleges barely teach, yet every year they increase their fees. Try that in a private business. You might get indicted for fraud. Do it at an American university, and you get billions in taxpayer subsidies. Mark Roosevelt is the president of St. John's College in Santa Fe. St. John's is one of the only colleges in America that is still trying to provide a traditional liberal arts education centered on the study of great books. Mark Roosevelt joins us today. President Roosevelt, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. So,
thanks for having me.
I want to talk to you specifically because I think this is not to promote your school, but I do think St. John's is different from most universities. To me, you've got a different vantage on this. Looking at the country, how has it happened that when more people are going to college than ever before, there is a consistent decline in adult literacy? How did that happen?
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing St. John's to join this conversation. We believe in conversation and civil discourse, which is another thing that, as you've pointed out, is unfortunately absent from many places.
Yes, I agree.
Wow. We are, you noted that we were different, Mr. Carlson. We are so different. We may be the most rigorous college in America. Our freshmen must learn ancient Greek. Our seniors struggle with quantum physics. Along the way, they have to take calculus. They have to learn how to do differential equations, and they have to study Hegel and Kierkegaard and Karl Marx and Adam Smith. So we are sailing against almost every prevailing wind in American higher education. I do agree with a lot of what you said at the beginning, that there has been slippage in rigor, slippage in the demands academically made of students. And we think that is a mistake, and we have no intention of joining that particular parade in higher education.
Well, good for you. I wonder, though, what you make of this phenomenon. Maybe I'm misreading it, but as the outcomes decline, become less impressive, kids know less when they graduate, rigor declines. You would think colleges would say, we're turning out people who don't know very much. Only 30% can read a complex book. Maybe we want to teach them more. But the opposite seems to be happening. Why?
Well, I'm not sure that I know the answer to why. The movement towards allowing students to shape their own curriculum and to be able to determine their own education is part of it. A lack of expectations is another part of it. Again, not to return to St. John's, but that's what I know best. Our students read 200 books, and I mean 200 serious books over the course of their education. But, Mr. Carlson, in all honesty, we are for very few folks. I mean, we have about 800 students between our two campuses, and our students are very self-selecting. They know what they're getting into. They know how hard it's going to be. And, you know, that is a very serious challenge for a lot of students, and
so
most
maybe that's
colleges
it.
are not like that.
Well, so maybe you put your finger on it. What you're offering is a traditional liberal arts education that would have been familiar to a lot of well-educated Americans 100 years ago. Now you've got 800 students. So I guess the question is, what percentage of the American population is really suited for, interested in, should participate in a liberal arts education?
Well, you know, I honestly believe that there ought to be a lot of diversity in our educational offerings. You've talked in the previous shows about career preparation, and there is a place for that. There's a place for people who want to get trained to do a job, even though we also know from colleges that only about 20% of students will actually work in something that they majored in. As you may know, Mr. Carlson, we don't have majors at St. John's. We don't think that life breaks down into majors. So again, we're just very different. So, you know, the liberal arts education can be described in very different things in very different places. At St. John's, it's an all-required curriculum. Everybody's taking all of the same courses, and they're all of equal rigor and equal demands. They're in very small classes. You know, an average of about 15 students in a class, so there's no place for them to hide. So the rigor is very real.
And I hope it stays that way. Mark Roosevelt, thanks a lot for joining us. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome.
New audio tape exposes how the NFL, the owners, and some key players tried to handle the national anthem protests. We will tell you exactly what they said coming up. The NFL suffered a big ratings drop and a loss of public support after dozens of players publicly protested the national anthem. The president blasted the league, and in response, Commissioner Roger Goodell suggested it was somehow wrong to disrespect a pro sports league. Now, a leaked audio tape reveals a secret meeting between NFL owners and players where they discuss how to mitigate the impact of the protests. Missing from the agenda any notion the league should stand up for the dignity of the anthem or the country or anything like that. Jason Whitlock rejoins us tonight. So, Jason, I've only seen the New York Times, the Mark Leibovich version of this. I haven't heard all 3 hours of the tape, obviously. But you really get a picture from the Times story of a group of people pretty out of touch with what's happening in the rest of the country.
Yeah, I think so, but we got to remember, this is the New York Times reporting the story. This is a 3-hour meeting. They have the entire audio tape. I'm a little bit reluctant to rely on the New York Times representation of what happened here because the New York Times is a part of the attack on football. And so I'm not surprised reading this story that no one looks good. No one looks like they have a real clue about what they should do because I think the New York Times is invested in tearing down football, the NFL in particular.
Interesting. A nuance that went over my head. Part of the story describes the owner of the Miami Dolphins, this guy Ross, suggesting a march on Washington with NFL owners and players. What would that look like?
I'm not sure, but in a meeting like this, I don't blame people for spitballing ideas. It's the first time you're having a meeting about this issue. Again, I'm a bit sympathetic to NFL owners on this because they have a successful television show that they've been running for 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
They got a curveball thrown to them by Colin Kaepernick. And so I'm not surprised they didn't know how to handle it. And they can't believe the way the media is all rigged against them because you can't inject common sense into this discussion. The NFL is a television show. And so you have a television show. If you decided, hey, you know what, I'm going to talk about cooking every day on this show rather than politics, your bosses would have a right. No. That's not what we do on our television show. And the NFL owners have a right to say, no. On our television show, we're very patriotic. We don't have protest right before kickoff of our football games. That's not the way we conduct our TV show. Our viewers don't want it. The people in the stands don't want it. We get you want to talk about these issues. We'll give you money. We'll pay you for playing these games. You can talk about these issues on your time, not during my television show. The media needs to explain that to people.
Yeah.
Everybody has to abide by rules in television and in other employment issues. If I worked at the post office or UP, anywhere, there's rules I have to follow. We're acting as if these players can make their own rules, and anyone that objects is a racist. That's absolutely ridiculous. I wish the NFL would take this issue by the horns because the NFL has a great story to tell, and football has a great story to tell about its help of African Americans. This league is 70% black.
Well, no, I know, but they're too. That's why you should run it
all about anything.
You should run it. They should hire you. I'd hire you if I ran the NFL. Kick that Goodell character out. Jason Whitlock always says things I've never thought of, and I appreciate it. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Friend Zone next. Fox and Friends host Ainsley Earhart, everyone's favorite. Hours before our interview tomorrow with President Trump. She's got a brand new book out. We'll tell you what it is. Stay tuned.